this exciting stuff going on there, and just have some specific questions I want to go through to share with you what they've been working on. So, Zach, I think you folks have a kind of vision of DeFi going mainstream that'd be interesting for everyone to hear and understand. So what is that vision of mainstreaming DeFi?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. For me, my first exposure to crypto was really, friends of mine who were using Bitcoin to settle poker transactions online and gambling transactions online. For me, I was never really into playing poker other than with friends or whatever, so that wasn't really all that meaningful for me and didn't really spark that idea of invention. But I went to law school and studied a lot of contracts, a lot of executing different counterparty risk and stuff like that. And it wasn't until I read the Ethereum white paper that it all really kind of clicked for me. And I remember reading the white paper probably about 2015, and I was sitting alone in my place in the Caribbean, and I just had this aha moment where I was like, wow, as soon as everybody realizes what is going to be possible with trustless contract execution, and two parties across the world are going to be able to transact, whether it's real estate, finance, pretty much anything, without having to ever meet each other, come face to face, engage attorneys, and these contracts are going to be self-executing, everything's going to change, from finance to real estate, everything. And I'm sitting there in my place, it was 2015, and I was like, any day now this is going to happen, right? Just any day now. And then I remember weeks go by, months go by, it's not, it's catching on, but more from a speculative standpoint. And I remember just every year getting deeper and deeper into crypto, thinking this is going to be the year where everything changes. And finally here we are, it's 2025, and I think we're really finally starting to see that monumental shift where businesses are all going all in on crypto and DeFi. Governments are going all in on crypto and DeFi. And the moment for me that I thought was going to happen a decade ago is finally starting to happen. So I think that we're really at a point where it's cheaper and more efficient to really transact through smart contracts, through crypto, through cryptography. And I think that everyone from governments to major traditional financial institutions are very much aware of this and trying to basically get on track before they get left behind.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think your realization about how this changes relationships, digital relationships and contractual relationships, was actually the thing that got me very interested in this after I saw that there could be things other than Bitcoin. So when I got into the industry in 2010, Bitcoin was the only thing that existed. All you could really do was mine Bitcoin and use it for payments. And because the price was so low, everyone talked about it as a micro transactions platform. Bitcoin has this amazing property where if the price is high, it's a store of value. If the price is low, it's a microtransactions platform. It's like one of the most amazing things I've seen in any technology. No matter what Bitcoin does, it has an amazing application. But I guess it's true in both cases. It's fine. In any case, then when I saw that people could make these blockchains that were not Bitcoin, I realized what you realized, which is that you could have transactions that were cryptographically guaranteed, which is a huge leap forward, right? And I think you're right that we're kind of at the place where the cost and complexity of using the technology is now it's been hitting all-time lows for a long time, but it's the cost and complexity of doing transactions and building applications is just going lower and lower and lower because you have all these composable building blocks that can be used to build these transactions, right? So I think it's you're right that it's now coming to fruition, and we're realizing that vision of the world and that version of the world. So that's super exciting. You folks have been doing really great work, I think, and you've made a lot of progress. You're off to a very good start with one of the largest token sales in the history of our industry, and maybe one of the top 2 or 3 compliant token sales for $550 million. I think over 80,000 individual people participated, and there was a period where that didn't look like it was going to come together, and then it massively came together. I think for many people, that type of token sale and that type of start is what a lot of them are looking for. So could you tell us about how that evolved? How did that come together? What was your experience there?
Yeah, so I think for us, it was a very interesting journey because typically when you see large token sales, they're all built around the hype of a roadmap, right? And one of the things for us that's been very difficult, and well, it's not so much difficult now. I mean, we've been very successful in spite of it. But when we came out with our token sale and decided to do our token sale first, the token sale itself was never the goal of the project, right? Like, in fact, it was kind of like the least important part of our project. The reality of World Liberty Financial and what we're building are various products and applications that really bridge traditional finance with decentralized finance. And for us, the initial token sale was mostly about marketing the project, building awareness, and distributing governance across a large group of people that wanted to participate and get involved with the project. So when we set out to do the token sale, we were very clear that this was a pure governance token, right? The utility of the token is governance. The governance was live on day one, clear-cut utility, right? But because of the nature of who's involved in our project and the time in which we launched the project itself, it became a political hot button. And so for us, our biggest concern was not, are we going to sell a lot of tokens? Our biggest concern was, are we going to have to deal with an administration that's very unfriendly towards our industry and try to shut us down and stop us in our tracks before we even get out to start building and delivering the products that we really are here to do. So we decided to take a more difficult approach, a lot more uphill battle, but we registered as a Reg D and Reg S offering, US and non-US sales. And as a result, our attorneys were very clear that we couldn't talk about anything forward-looking, so we couldn't share any of our product roadmap, we couldn't share any of the things that we were planning on doing, and we had to just market a token sale purely on the fact that it was a token sale. And so, I guess a lot of people traditionally like to buy into the hype, the idea of what's being built, when the reality is that a lot of these token sales that have gone off, the companies fail to actually deliver on the promise. I mean, I'm sure everyone in here has seen that happen many times. There's a lot of hype around a project, it sells a ton of money, but then the team kind of dissipates, the idea kind of dissipates, and nothing ever comes of it. Where in reality, our project was very different because the entire time that we were, planning the token sale, delivering the token sale, etc., we were already hard at work in building this project and the products that we were getting ready to ship, regardless of whether we sold one token or all of the tokens. So I think the expectation, because of the fact that we're backed by the Trumps, that we were going to sell out on day one, that was never our goal. But it is what it is, and I think people thought that when we sold $6 or $8 million in the first day, the news looked at it and they liked to politicize it and they called it a failure. But the reality was that people who knew what was going on, and as we started talking to people about what we were actually building, we got a lot of buy-in and a lot of industry support from companies like Chainlink, like Aave, like Justin Sun and Tron. And I think people started to realize that the smart money and the real people who drive this industry forward were very bullish on what we were doing and very confident in the vision that we had and the team that we're putting together. And so it just kind of picked up and built momentum like things tend to do. And Justin came in, he bought about $30 million worth of tokens initially. He eventually bought, I think, $75 or $100 million worth of tokens, I don't know offhand. That was a really good signal to the market. And a lot of the partnerships that we built were very strong signals to the market, and it drove a lot of interest in the project. We ended up doing over $550 million in total token sales. We sold out the initial 300 that we had set to sell and opened up an additional tranche and sold an extra $250 million. So while this was never the goal to sell a lot of tokens and necessarily go out and do that much volume in token sales, it just speaks to the demand and the trust and the support that we have from people who really know what's going on in the industry, that we are really building very meaningful products, and we're very serious about delivering on our promises.
Yeah, makes sense.
Oh, and sorry, not to interrupt. We made it even harder by doing full KYC and accreditation. So once again, everybody in crypto knows that like the idea of doing KYC or being an accredited investor is kind of the opposite of what crypto is all about, right? Like everyone likes to remain anonymous. Everyone loves the idea that the smallest guy has the opportunity to turn a penny into $1 million. But the reality is that by registering and requiring accreditation inside the US, we were actually looking out for people and making sure that people didn't get hurt, right? Like the last thing I want is someone in middle America who knows nothing about crypto to buy in and put their whole life savings into something that they don't fully understand, only to get turned upside down. And so that was very important to us and our partners. So it wasn't just about being compliant for the sake of being compliant, but also for the sake of protecting the consumers and making sure that people aren't getting hurt by something that they don't necessarily fully understand.
Yeah, makes sense. I think what you're going to see is more and more folks trying to do this compliant route, but that is the more difficult route, and there's a lot of friction that introduces.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that you folks were able to put together this much money with that much friction and that much process does say a lot about the interest level in the project, basically. So I think if you take the top 10 token sales, you guys are in the top 10. But then if you take those top 10 and you cut out the ones that didn't have any kind of process to comply with anything, you would be in the top 2 or 3, something like that. So I think it is a testament of the market interest behind what you folks are doing and building, which I think is going to be pretty interesting and great. So I think now would be a good time to talk about that, right? So what is it that you folks are building at World Liberty? I know there's a lending protocol side and an RWA protocol side. How do those two things work together? What is the high level view of what World Liberty is?
Sure. So in terms of what we're building, I would say that we have 3 main products that we're actually building and developing, 2 of which are already done and ready to ship. So again, the whole idea of, we did this token sale and now, we're going to go back into a hole and take all this time to put something together. That's very much not what we wanted to do. We wanted to come out swinging. So the first product, I'm going to pass on that because I think we have some really big announcements coming out around that in the next couple of weeks. And, Sergey and Chainlink have been very instrumental in helping us bring those to fruition and making them very meaningful for the entire ecosystem and DeFi space. The second, which is also ready to go and ready to ship, is our lend and borrow market, which you were just alluding to. And so that's basically ready to go as well. We're just working on staging so that we can really get through our entire product roadmap and roll it out in a way that's meaningful and makes sense. So that lend and borrow market is actually something that's probably pretty well known to people here who've been following the World Liberty financial journey. We're working with Aave to roll out our own lend and borrow market, which is going to be powered by Aave's smart contracts. And the beauty there is we have the ability to take advantage of all of the security and the trust that Aave has built up, as well as the expertise they have in risk mitigation. But at the same time, we get to control the entire market ourselves so that it passes through our own governance process instead of having to be subject to the DAO governance. And the thing that I think is really interesting about that is when you look at traditional financial institutions, there's a lot of these TradFi institutions that right now today have a bunch of tokenized assets. They already have them. But the problem is they don't actually have a use case for how they can utilize them, deploy them, market them, etc. And so our goal is really to merge the world of DeFi and all the best of what DeFi has to offer with a lot of the products that TradFi has to offer that are not available right now in the DeFi ecosystem. So what are we talking about? We're talking about money market accounts. We're talking about commercial real estate. We're talking about all sorts of debt, all sorts of securities that exist now, in the regular markets that are not accessible to people in DeFi. So all of these TradFi institutions, whether they have tokenized assets now or are working to develop them, because they are, and having conversations with all of them, they either have them or they're working towards developing them, because they know that this is where the future is going. And so for them, they need to be able to interact with a real business that they can KYC, they know who the principals are, and they can put together a commercial deal. And for them, it's kind of funny to think of the idea of a major TradFi institution going to a governance forum and posting a proposal, right? Like it's never going to happen. They're never going to get their stakeholders behind it. But World Liberty Financial is a U.S. corporation where all of the principals are fully KYC'd. We can work directly with these institutions to bring their assets on chain, to give them access to liquidity that's on chain that they want exposure to, and to be able to give people like us who are in crypto and DeFi access to a whole range of products that traditionally are not available to us. So if you think back to 2015, when I got into crypto, the idea of moving to a stable place after making a bunch of money on an altcoin was Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? You would trade altcoins and then you would have to trade it back. I mean, this was even before stable coins were a thing. You would have to swap it back to Ethereum or to Bitcoin, and that's where you would basically store, your value, where it was secure, right? And now, we've seen that Bitcoin has actually stabilized quite a bit, but even the idea of, a 5% drawdown, that's unheard of in traditional markets, right? If there's a 5% loss in a market, it's a really bad day for Wall Street, right? Whereas for all of us, that's just a normal Tuesday. So, the idea here is to be able to give us as crypto DeFi natives the ability to get exposure to products that are more secure, more trusted, and more time tested that exist in a TradFi institutional setting that is not currently available on chain, and give these traditional institutions access to liquidity that only exists on chain right now.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I think it's starting at this lending protocol level, and then the RWA protocol, and then obviously those two things I think will end up working together, because you can make lending markets for the RWA protocol side, right? And then the stuff you mentioned about being a U.S. entity and AML KYC principles, and the fact that the principals are pretty significant folks in the world sphere generally, I think can lead to a lot of interesting RWAs being made available on World Liberty Finance, probably before other places. And then eventually, not eventually, actually very quickly, because you have a lending protocol, you can have lending markets on entirely new categories of RWAs that were previously not available, right? So I know that's going to take a lot of work, and it's not clear at what timeline that's going to happen. But yeah, I've definitely seen that you folks have built a lot of stuff, and you've done it in a very secure way. It's also very interesting how you did it with Aave, that you actually have a DAO vote from Aave approving it in a commercial deal. So it's very collaborative. Lots of people in our industry, what they do is they fork things, and they just ignore the people who build the technology, and they don't collaborate with them. But I think one of the interesting things that World Liberty Finance did is they collaborated with Aave DAO on a revenue sharing agreement that was approved and voted on by the DAO. So I think what this is looking like to me is another version of the next generation of DeFi protocols, right? So the DeFi protocol is financed through a compliant pathway, right? All of the principals and the entity are US based, are in the geography where they want to generate the RWAs. Now, if you end up generating those RWAs together with you and the other co-founders of World Liberty Finance participating in that and generating those RWAs in various categories, then you'll have a big pool of high-quality RWAs that others won't. And when you do that, you'll do it in a way that is collaborative with the DeFi community and the protocols and systems that you're using, like Aave. So they'll get a share of the revenue, and our collaboration has been very positive and kind of very productive, I think, in generating a high-quality, reliable system. So I think this is kind of a pattern that I'm seeing of protocols like World Liberty and teams like Zach that want to be compliant, want to generate next-generation RWAs through collaboration with the TradFi ecosystem, but at the same time, they want to have a very collaborative relationship with the DeFi community, right? So they don't just want to fork this and fork that. They want to collaborate with the DeFi community, whether it's an infrastructure set of protocols like Chainlink, or whether it's something like Aave that they're using their contracts. The interesting thing for me is that you don't have to rebuild Aave, right? And you don't have to rebuild Chainlink. And you don't have to rebuild, the stuff that you use for the other, RWAs and other things.
Yeah, nor do we even really want to, because, at the end of the day, my partner Chase and I, we come from the DeFi world, and, our partners, Zach Witkoff and the Witkoffs and the Trumps, they come from the TradFi world, right? And so we understand both sides of the equation. Just like we're not going to go and rebuild, Goldman Sachs. We're going to work with Goldman Sachs and all the other institutions that are out there. Why go rebuild something that's already done so well, like Chainlink, like Aave, etc.? Our goal here is not to remake the wheel. It's just to make sure that every driveway has 2 cars parked outside. So that really means going out and finding the best in class at every single piece of what this wheel looks like, and being the glue that holds it together. Going out there, marketing it using the massive platform that we've built, and bringing on the next wave of 100 million users and billions and maybe even trillions of dollars of liquidity into the space by creating these products that have abstracted away a lot of the difficulty and a lot of the reasons that have kept people outside of our industry to begin with.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, World Liberty Finance is a very good example of these building blocks we're always talking about in our industry being used now to create a world-class application, right? And then also at the same time, that world-class DeFi and Web3 application interfacing successfully with the TradFi world, because the way that the application was thought out and financed and how it's being managed from a legal point of view is compliant, right? So this is a kind of pattern that I think we'll see more and more of, that the World Liberty Finance team is doing well on all these dimensions. I think you have another dimension of World Liberty Finance, which is the user experience, and I think right now you're calling it the World Liberty Finance app, but maybe it'll have a different name. Could you tell us about that and how that'll evolve?
Yeah, so I think this is just taking the idea one step further. So, everybody right now, whether, you're in this room or outside of this room and know nothing about crypto, everyone's got a bank account. Everyone's got a debit card, right? Most of us have some sort of job that pays us. And the whole use and reason for having a bank account is so you can get your money in it and you can go spend money. And if you have a savings account or a brokerage account, it's to grow that money and make it more useful, right? So our whole feeling is that DeFi can do all of these things better, whether it's self-custody of your assets, whether it's getting a better yield on your actual deposits by powering it through DeFi, or even spending it more freely. So our goal here for the retail side, and when I speak about bringing in the next $100 million or 100 million users and the next trillions of dollars worth of liquidity into the space, it's not going to be by making people understand how to become a crypto native, making people remember a 24-word seed phrase that they bury in their backyard and give half to their mom and half to their Aunt Sally, right? Like, that's just not usable. So our whole goal here is to build a very familiar style Web 2 application that anybody, my mom, your mom, anybody could go on and use instantly. It feels familiar to them, like a Venmo, like a Robinhood, and allows them to earn, spend, and save all of their assets, whether it's their paycheck or whether it's their savings account or their brokerage account, in one easy-to-use place. And making it very simple, abstract away a lot of the crypto difficult stuff that's kept people outside the industry, and give people a better return powered on DeFi rails.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think the nuance there is the better return. I think if you can take private credit or the yield on treasuries or the yield on any number of things, maybe combine those. Basically, my view is that the DeFi boom historically has always been driven by superior yield, right? So if you have higher yield than the traditional financial system, you will always convert some percentage of net new users, right? You will have the DeFi users who will probably be on to like 20% yield from some crazy yield farming, meme coin, whatever thing, which good luck to them managing the risk on that, and I'm sure it'll be great. I'm not against it. It's a great thing, and do more. Fine. But for the average person, yeah, if they can get 4% over there and they can get 5 or 6% over here, if you can actually smooth that out, and you can make it easier for them to access that, and you can make it easier for them to get their cash or their savings or some other dimension of their personal life into those assets, that is a very attractive force, right?
Yeah, I mean, 4 to 5% on a safe cash deposit is a massive return. I have friends whose entire portfolios, whether it's outside of crypto or just in general, is 100% in T-bills. They want no risk, but they still want some sort of growth, right? So maybe for some people, the right mixture of risk is fully in T-bills, and that's totally fine. I mean, if you compare 4% or 4.5% or 5% to what you're getting from your regular savings or checking account, I mean, it makes it look like a joke. It's almost insulting when you log into your bank account and you see how much they deposit every quarter or whatever it is, quarter or every 3 months, whatever, I guess it's every quarter. When you see what they're actually giving you for letting them lend out your money tenfold, it's kind of insulting, So I think DeFi can give people a much better experience simply by passing that yield back to the user.
Yeah, I don't even know what they give you in bank accounts now. I got out of that whole racket. It's weird.
So maybe we know the one guy at least who doesn't have a bank account.
No, I have some bank accounts, but I don't think that's where you want to keep your assets or anything. DeFi and all that stuff. I'm aping into a lot of things now. And you drop like 6 tokens and they go up in price. I'm kidding.
Ape token, is that what you just said?
I'm kidding. Joke. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Be careful here. So I think one of the things that'll make all of those outcomes that you just said more likely, that interface and the real world assets being generated on your protocol because you're in a compliant position to do it, is what's happening in Washington, right? So I think in DC we're seeing a lot of movement. You and your partner Zach Witkoff are very active and doing a lot of good work. I've been in DC doing a lot of great stuff together with you and others. So what are you kind of really seeing there? How are you seeing that evolve?
Yeah, well, I think last time we were in DC just a couple of weeks ago, you, me, Chase, and Zach sat down and we really started talking about this. And I think there's always been the desire from our community to be regulated to some degree and have just some general rules of the road so that we know, or at least the good actors in the space know, like, what can you do and what can't you do. And if you know what you can do and what you can't do, just focus on building in a way where you're compliant and within the rules of the road. The problem is we haven't had any of that guidance for so long. And while this industry continues to grow and continues to produce GDP for our country, there's been absolutely no love by our lawmakers or our regulators to support this fostering industry, right? So I think finally, we're starting to see this administration, but not just this administration, the entire U.S. legislative body seems to have finally embraced our industry for the first time and is really starting to try to make sensible rules and regulations and legislation to support it and to bring crypto and blockchain back to America instead of having to push all of these incredible innovators offshore. And so, obviously, are they going to get it right the first time with every bill they pass? Probably not. But at least there's a very honest effort where people are trying to do what's best for the industry and actually bring it back home, as opposed to just, regulate it out of existence or make it so difficult that none of us actually know what we can and can't do. And I think we're finally in a place where we're going to see some sensible guidance and allow people like you, like us, like everyone in this room who's a builder, to be able to move forward with confidence, knowing that you're not going to be debanked, get your assets stolen or frozen, or end up under a DOJ that literally is there just to be weaponized against us for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very different world than it was even, I would say, maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago. So it's
Something probably happened that changed, right?
something definitely happened. That's for sure. And it's completely changed our industry, right? Way for the better. I think the thing that I'm seeing is that all of the support from the Trump administration and the presidency and the executive branch is really pushing the legislative branch to do a lot of work, not only on these two bills, the Market Structure Bill and the Genius Act for stablecoins, but also more than that, right? And I think they're also working on a very tight timeline, as I understand, in August. So by the middle of this year or the early second half of this year, there should be some real progress on some of these bills, which will form the foundation of how these transactions work, what's a security, what's a commodity, how does stablecoin work as payment. And then my hope is that it can start creating the system over there, the legislative side, and the regulators can start creating two forms of clarity. One form of clarity would be from regulators to make it clear what is a compliant RWA, how do you issue an RWA as an institution or as a DeFi or as a fintech, so that you folks in the compliant way that you're seeking can generate more and more of these RWAs with your TradFi partners and so on. And then also, how do you create various markets around these things, whether that's a derivatives market or a lending market or any other set of markets. And then on the legislative side, I'm really hopeful that they'll be receptive to things like proof of reserves, proof of composition, things that prove more and more about the underlying asset in a way that makes it more reliable and better for the whole system, the whole US financial system, for the consumer, for the custodian, for everybody. So it's an extremely positive time. I think the thing that people still underestimate is just how much resistance and slowdown the whole industry was experiencing from the point of view of the legal process, right, and the weaponization against our industry and so on. Now that's gone, it's a huge advantage. But now what I'm seeing more and more is like the dynamic that I've seen in places like Singapore, where the government is actually trying to encourage the creation of these assets and trying to encourage the development of our industry rather than slowing it down. So I'm really excited by that, and I think there are certain teams like yours and ours that are very active in that process, and I've seen a lot of very receptive, very senior people in the U.S. government. Have you felt the same way?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Again, you're starting to see the people coming to the table are the people like the Chainlinks, like World Liberty, like a lot of different projects out there, exchanges, different industry participants that really just want to be doing this the right way, who want to do this above board, who want to forge a way forward for not just ourselves, but companies that come after us to be able to follow a framework that makes sense. And one thing that I saw that really made me proud was somebody asked on Twitter, how do you issue a DeFi token in a compliant way from the US? And this was, I'm not going to name names, but this was like a very prominent person on Twitter. And the response from another very prominent person on Twitter was, just look at what World Liberty Financial has done. And to me, that made me more proud than any amount of tokens we sold, any accolades, anything like that, because our whole goal when we set out to do this, and we started under the previous administration, was to build a framework where you didn't have to hide as a crypto founder. You could be a US corporation, pay US tax, and be able to do it in a way where you didn't have to hide under your bed every night, hoping that everything was going to be okay. So just being able to be part of that discussion and be part of that solution is very meaningful for us. We're very, very excited about the opportunity for our entire country to get behind this and to bring crypto back home. So many of my friends who are US persons, I'm sure you as well, their companies are operated out of the Caymans, out of the Bahamas, out of BVI, wherever it might be, because they just had no other option, And given the option, I think not everyone, but most people would much rather bring crypto back to America and be an actual participant in this GDP and making this country what it once was.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think really, I've seen only a few teams really active in DC like us that are from the DeFi community, and you are definitely one of those people and one of those teams together with Zach Witkoff and the other members of your team. So personally, I'm actually very grateful that your team is so active and helpful to our industry as a whole, and is helping drive forward all these positive changes in DC on behalf of our industry. So just want to say thank you for that.
We are going to do anything we can to do it for you guys and for the rest of crypto and DeFi, because we truly believe that what we're doing is meaningful. And when I say we, I don't mean World Liberty, I mean our entire industry is meaningful. And it's very difficult for a DAO to have that sort of a voice because we are a US corporation with US persons behind it. We are very comfortable taking that position, making a case for all of us, and doing everything we can to kind of bring a light to what all of us are building, because we really believe in it. We've been here for a long time and we're not going anywhere. So we'll continue to do it until we can't do it anymore.
So thank you very much, Zach, for the interesting conversation, as always. And thank you once again for all the support your team has given and created for our industry in DC. I think it's a big deal. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.